How I made $8 million dollars in 4 years online and the four pillars of freedom that got me there. So, I want to start off by saying 2025 is the best year to start or reinvent your business. I know a lot of people have tried a lot of different businesses over time. I have been starting businesses for over 18 years. Not all of them made it. Some of them I had to reinvent. And this year, with all the tools that we have available to us right now, it is the time. It's never been easier. The phone or laptop you're reading this on, it's really the only physical tool you require. And the product can come out of your head. You don't have to make anything that's like tangible. In fact, most of the money I've ever made was not a tangible product. It's never been more profitable, and the only limitation is your mind. Software and knowledge can be scaled infinitely, and software is getting easier and easier to make, and will probably play less of a role because of AI. And your knowledge and your specific wisdom and your specific story is what's going to really make the difference. And what's really cool about being someone who is selling knowledge and wisdom is that it's scalable. What that means is whether you sell 100 or a million, it doesn't cost you any more to create it. And it's never been faster. You can go from idea to your first transaction in a matter of hours. I never build products until I've sold them. I may ideate them a little bit, but I sell them first and then I make them because I know I can make the minimum viable product in an afternoon in most cases. And that's because I have a lot of practice in it, but you can get that practice as well. And if you follow what's going on at OpenAI at all, those are the people who made ChatGPT. Sam Altman was interviewed and he was talking about there's going to be some 10-person companies with billion-dollar valuations soon, and they're looking forward to, and at what point is someone going to have a billion-dollar company run by one person? And because of AI, that's going to be made possible. So you may not dream of a billion-dollar company. I definitely do not care to have a billion-dollar company, but it is reasonable right now to aspire to be a 7 or 8 figure business owner. That means you're making $1 million or more a year. And you probably don't need the IQ or the stress that you may imagine that it takes. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to embed some lessons in here about how I started with a 4-man team, a company that made that $8 million in 4 years. So at the end of 2013, I was making tens of thousands of dollars each month online, and it was totally blowing my mind. And I was super excited about it. And it felt unbelievable because I actually was making more money than I ever imagined I would make. I never thought of myself as somebody who would run a highly successful business. I always figured, if I could just make 6 figures a year, then I would, then I will have made it. Because I grew up in a place where, if that's what you did, then that you were doing great. But I was starting to blow right past that. And I really felt like a rock star because what I did was I started a podcast and YouTube channel with 3 of my best friends. And we started YouTubing and podcasting and traveling around the world and doing it with people in person. And, nobody was really doing high production value YouTube videos at the time, not the way we were doing it. And being first to the market, there's something to be said for that. But we also put some really cool stuff in place that allowed us to be as successful as we were. And our show was ranked number 1 on iTunes. I want to note this. We were ranked number 1 on iTunes for years in the fitness and nutrition category. So it's one thing to be there in 2012. It's another thing to be holding that spot in 2013, 2014, 2015, 16, 17. We were still holding that spot. And that's really important to note because a lot of people had come in. So it wasn't just about being first. It was which is great because we're kind of in the same spot with AI. Like the first people to really leverage it are can be the ones that benefit. But as you start to become one of the top in your field, you have to learn what's going to continue to work. So I was living the rock star lifestyle. I was signing autographs at athletic events and people recognized me at airports. It was pretty fucking wild. And those tens of thousands of dollars that were coming in every month actually turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next 2 years. And it had little to do with hard work. It was not a hard work thing. I was really in a place of playing, and my co-hosts and business partners, they were playing as well. So to talk about that, I want to rewind to 2011, 2 years before the cash came rolling in. Before it was 2013 and we were making tens of thousands of dollars a month. In 2011, I was just running a CrossFit gym, and this was the most successful business I had so far. So I had started a bunch of different businesses at different times, trying to find what is meaningful work that I feel inspired about that pays me well. But the CrossFit gym was the best thing that I had figured out up until that point. And my life revolved around it. I was there 7 days a week, 363 days a year. It might have been 365. I just say that because I probably took Christmas off. And I worked really hard then. I was up at 5 a.m. I was going to bed at 11 p.m. I was at the gym all day, and I was making about $4,000 per month from it. And that was after I, paid for the staff and the gym bills and all that kind of stuff. But I was barely making more than I was making in the Navy 6 years prior to that. But the thing was, at least as I was doing it on my own terms. So I was making just enough to have a house, a car, buy groceries. You get the deal. If you're making $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 now in 2025, it really, it's not going to go very far. But if you're doing what you love, it works. So in the 6 years, I started the gym in 2007 and all the way to 2011. I'd started a bunch of other businesses, and I ended up shutting them all down because they just didn't make the money, and they also they required a lot more effort than I could give it because the gym was taking so much time. But in 2011, I learned about this podcasting thing, and it reminded me a lot of the radio DJs that I grew up with. And I remember being a kid and listening to radio DJs and thinking, man, that would be such a sweet job, because I was listening to those radio DJs when I was working for my dad in construction. So I had started construction work around like 12, 13 years old. And I was like, man, I'm over here in the heat and in the cold and, cutting myself on the job and getting injured and things like that. I was like, these guys are just getting paid to talk. This is so cool. But I never really considered it career worthy because, so to break into that market, it's like, oh, I got to get permission from somebody. I got to get permission from a radio station to get on the air and this and that. And I didn't really like the idea of working for somebody else either. But now there was this opportunity. I go, oh, I can have a radio show basically, and I could just say whatever I want. And one of the things that really inspired me is I'd been listening to Rob Wolf, who was running a podcast that was very nutrition based, very science, and it was a bit dry, but I loved the topic, so I was really into it. But then Joe Rogan came into my field, and I started listening to Joe Rogan, and I go, oh my gosh, this guy's talking about mushrooms and Sasquatch and MMA. Like, oh, you could talk about anything. And so I put my sights on YouTube and podcast, and I said, let's just do this. Let's have fun with it. I have no idea how we're going to make money with it. I believed that we would make money doing it. I knew that I would figure out how to do it, but I did not know how we were going to do it. And I had no idea how much I could make with it. No idea. So it all started with my buddy Chris Moore and myself meeting at a coffee shop in Memphis, Tennessee on Wednesday mornings. He had read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and one of the strategies in the book was to free up some of your time for what you wanted to work on. And so he was working a corporate gig at Smith & Nephew, and he went to them and said, hey, I want to, and this is a strategy from the Tim Ferriss book. He said, hey, I want to work from home on Wednesdays, because he did a lot of writing. And he's like, I want to work from home on Wednesdays, and I think I'll be more productive that way, and this and that. And the company said, you know what? We're going to let you take off on Wednesday mornings or all day Wednesday. I think it was just start with Wednesday mornings. And so we would we would meet up on Wednesday mornings and we would just record a show uh, uh, at a coffee shop. I just had a microphone, I plugged it into a laptop, and we would record the show. And then we would share that with CTP, who ended up being our producer, uh, as he was delivering pizzas. Because he was an intern at my gym, but he made money delivering pizzas. So this is really pillar number one. Pillar number one for the freedom pillar is time autonomy. And so this is when you get to choose when you work. So Chris got to choose when he got to work. Now he didn't get 100% control of all of his days all of a sudden. He did about 10% at a time. So he negotiated Wednesday mornings, which turned into entire days Wednesdays. And then it turned into him actually showing up to work at later than everybody else and leaving earlier than everyone else. I think he was going into work at like 10, 11 noon and then leaving at like 3 or 4 p.m. And he was actually becoming more productive at work because he was being energized by the creativity that we were harnessing through doing the podcast. And he never actually, so he became more productive. And when he finally came time for him to quit, when we had actually started making money and I go, oh, Chris, we can like pay you enough. You're making enough money where you can quit your job. When he went to leave that job, they tried to retain him, even though he really pulled off the office space move. Like, I'll just show up less and less and less, and I stopped caring, and all of a sudden, he became even more effective with less effort. So that's another thing to keep in mind is when you're doing something creative, the things that you're doing in other areas of your life are also going to benefit. So pillar number 2 is task liberation. So this is free yourself from what you don't love. And so this is about where I was at when I was starting the podcast. And I had achieved task liberation because I had started a CrossFit gym, and when I first started it, I was doing everything. I was cleaning the toilets, I was writing the workouts, I was coaching the classes, I was paying the bills, I was posting the workouts on the blog, all that kind of stuff. And so I got to choose like the big picture what I was doing, but I had to do a bunch of stuff that I didn't want to do. But over time, I learned how to delegate, and almost every single task became optional. And I delegated the cheapest tasks. So to pay someone to clean the toilets, $10 an hour maybe. And then I delegated out the tasks I hated the most. So I ended up delegating myself into an open schedule, and the gym was running without my presence at all. I could work really became optional. And one thing I want to note before that is I was waking up early, and in between classes, I was studying how to do marketing online. So it wasn't just like I started this and then I learned this. I was always trying to figure out how to go online as I was doing things in the gym business. But once I got everything delegated and I really freed up my time, I spent a lot more of my time reading and taking online courses to figure out what the next level was. So most people start their own business dreaming of doing what they love, but they rarely see all the things that are going to happen. And so delegation is not something that usually comes easy to people. It didn't come easy to me. Most of my clients, delegation is not something like, boom, I've got it. It's a skill to develop, and I'm still developing it over time. One of the benefits of working with AI and ChatGPT and things like this is I've actually improved as a delegator because I'm delegating to a machine and it's giving me feedback immediately over what that is. So you can learn delegation a lot faster than it took me to learn it. So when you can delegate appropriately, you get control over your time and your tasks. So that's pillar number 2. Chris Moore ended up unlocking the task freedom eventually as well, but the freedom time, the freedom pillar of time is a thing that really got him to where he wanted to go. And that's probably where you're going to have to start as well if you haven't done it already. And I'm going to jump to pillar number 4, and that's creative sovereignty. And that's playing with purpose. And so freedom over time and tasks if you have freedom over time and you have freedom over tasks, then you actually get to choose what it is that you want to do. You can create, explore, and innovate on your terms. And there's this famous question for finding your passion. What would you do if you couldn't fail? Or what would you do if you had $1 million back when $1 million was a lot of money? What would you do if money wasn't an issue? And that's a fun exercise, but the mind really can't comprehend that concept. You won't really know until you get there. And I actually achieved what would be closest to it, and by delegating out the time and task. And I didn't have $1 million in the bank, but all my basic needs were met. And so I had achieved the closest to it, and I know you can too. And the bite of failure had lost its teeth because of that. I could try something and it wouldn't work, and it was okay. And so I spent my time choosing, completing tasks I cared about, and creating a new direction for my life. So the business and delegating and doing what I want to do gave me control over every area of my life. So with each episode we recorded, I became more energized. My creativity blossomed. New possibilities emerged. Experiments in my garage with guests and trial co-hosts ensued on the weekends. I was setting up in my garage a little studio, and we were live streaming. I don't know if I remember the streaming platform we were using at the time. Back in the day, super grainy. And so I was inviting friends into my garage. I had a couch set up, and we would have a couple drinks, and I was basically trying out different co-hosts. I knew that me and Chris wanted to do it, and then after a couple months of doing that, Doug Larson he was my business partner in the gym. He became, Doug's also the co-host. So we have Chris, Doug, and myself. And then our intern, Chris Norman, we called him CTP, which stands for Chris the Producer. He became our director, videographer, sound engineer, editor, all this stuff. He actually sold a lot of like amps and guitars and stuff like that to buy the gear in order to edit everything down and to shoot everything. We had really great cameras at the time. So we formed the team and established the name of the show, which was Barbell Shrugged. If you've been following me for a long time, I know some of y'all have been following me for over a decade. Y'all know Barbell Shrugged really well. If you have not been following me, you can go look up Barbell Shrugged on YouTube. I've since left that company in 2018, so most of the stuff you're not going to see me in. But if you go to the old stuff, you're going to see us hosting the show. And if you can rewind back like 10 years and go, it was pretty special for the time, because we treated the show, the podcast, the YouTube channel as the product. That's where the majority of our effort went. But it didn't result in the cash flowing in immediately. In the first 18 months, I don't think we made more than $1,000 in a single month. It definitely wasn't paying the bills. We were spending our own money to travel to the guests. Like I said, CTP also sold some musical instruments. This was a passion project. We were spending more money and effort on it than we were making back for like 18 months. Now, it didn't need to take 18 months for us to do that, but because we didn't have the knowledge of exactly what would be a good product to sell online, we just hadn't figured it out yet. And so in August of 2013, so we've been doing the show for 18 months, and CTP and I attended a digital marketing conference that year. And I remember I had been following this guy, Evan Pagan, online and consuming his content for years, and that helped me in my business just by taking his stuff online. And he was doing this webinar, and I thought to myself, wow, I'm going to go watch this webinar, and then I'm going to see how he sells, and then I'm going to see if we can, like, what is he selling so that I can also sell in the same way. Well, the webinar was selling us on a conference that was happening, and it cost $7,000, and I didn't have $7,000. So I ended up calling business partners and moving money around, and literally, like, we drained every account because we were living month to month at the time in order to buy these tickets. So in August of 2013, I walked into the conference excited, and I was so stoked to be there, and I was really intimidated. And that intimidation was real. I walked in, I was talking to people, and I started to feel like a failure because everyone was talking about all the money they were making, and I wasn't making any money. And it seemed like everyone was doing it, but I wasn't. And all I had was a YouTube channel and a podcast audience. But when I shared with the people there what I had, they'd just be like, "Whoa!" Their mind would get blown. Like, "Man, you have that big of an audience. Like, you're doing great." And they would tell me, I was like, "Well, I'm doing great, but I'm not really making any money at it yet." And they said, "Well, you've already done the hard part." And I heard that over and over and over and over again during this 7-day conference. And I was like, "What are you talking about?" The building of the audience was the easy part. We were just having fun because we weren't really focused on selling anything. We were really just putting out the best content we could possibly do. But at that conference, I found out what our missing piece of the puzzle was. And when I figured out what that missing piece of the puzzle was, and we put it into place, boom, the money started flowing in. And what it was is we crafted an offer that was uniquely positioned for our audience. We had been playing and having a good time for so long. We had built up this audience for 18 months. I think we were 30, 40, 50,000 people deep into YouTube. And when I sat down and I said to myself, who is my audience? I go, wow, the majority of young men who, when I look at the videos that got the most attention, it was the videos of strength athletes and strength coaches. I go, oh, these are CrossFitters who want to be strong, big and strong as well. I go, oh, when I look out at the CrossFit market, nobody is selling get big and strong while doing CrossFit. And so when we presented that, and this is back before, when Facebook groups actually, or not Facebook groups, but Facebook pages actually got attention. I was able to go into the Facebook page and say, hey, if we put out a strength and muscle gaining program for you, would you be interested? And I remember the comments just were firing off, and I was like, boom, there it is. So we had built our audience by having a good time. We didn't put any pressure on it by trying to figure out how to make money on it immediately. We did experience some frustration about not making money on it. But once we got the offer that matched the audience, that's when it all started coming together. And that's when we started making $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month, $30,000 a month, which turned into over $100,000 a month, month after month after month. And so that's pillar number 4, which is having that creative sovereignty, playing with purpose. Like, I'm playing and I have a purpose around how I'm playing, and I'm gonna keep fucking around and see what I find out. And I had a trust and a belief in myself and then what we were doing that it would work out. How it would happen, I had no idea. I think so many people get caught up in how it's going to happen. They never actually get into that zone of playing and just screwing around. And so pillar number 3, I'm going to go back from, we did 2, 1, 2, and 4. Pillar number 3 is geographic flexibility. So live and work where you thrive. And that is really looking at who you're surrounding yourself and where you're at. And so we were able to make enough money where I sat to and thought to myself one day, I'd made a trip out to California, and I go, man, I can live anywhere. So, and I was traveling to California a lot to do shows. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go from Memphis, Tennessee, where I was turning into a big fish in a little pond, and I'm going to go to Southern California, and I'm going to go be probably a small fish in the ocean. And I wanted to surround myself with other entrepreneurs, and that's exactly what happened. I was able to place myself geographically. So not only was I able to travel a lot, but I was able to live somewhere where I felt continuously inspired. And that's one of the things that keeps the flywheel moving with creativity. I now live in Austin, Texas. I don't live in Southern California anymore, for many various reasons. Everyone's probably aware of the great migration out of California to Texas, and so I'm part of that, and I'm loving it here. But I still get to travel a lot, and that keeps me being here inspires me, and being able to travel inspires me. But so here's the deal. Most people get owned and they never start. So even though it's the best time in human history to own a business, it's also the most likely time for someone to get owned. And what I mean by that is you get owned by social media, doom scrolling, global fear campaigns, overwhelming possibilities. So there's so many choices you don't even know what to make, politics, the comfortable living that a soul-sucking job can offer, outdated advice from an older generation, and programming from your ancestors. These are the things that end up owning us, that keeps us from taking the action and creating the life that we truly desire. So this is how it happens. This is like the process. And so you can reflect on this and go, okay, these are the things that I learned, and this is how I learned them. So I get to choose to learn a different way. So the trajectory of someone getting owned in 2025 is going to school and being told what to do. Going to more school, being told what to do, but now you can choose your classes. Get a job, told what to do again. You feel depressed, go to a doctor, get prescribed. They tell you, they're prescribing, they're telling you what to do. And they prescribe you soul-limiting psychiatric medications. And then scrolling social media and told what to think about and how to think about it. So as you can see, the slope is very slippery, and your perspective can get really, really narrowly shaped. But we can break out of this, because even though your position in life right now may not necessarily be your fault, and there's nothing that you can do to change the present moment and everything you've experienced up to this point, you can change what is happening right now and change your future. So it is your responsibility. It may not be your fault. So your parents didn't know any better, and neither did the teachers, doctors, police officers, military recruiters, or preachers. They were all doing the same thing. They were following orders. You ever notice that I was just following orders as a common excuse for poor behavior? And I use the word poor deliberately. So our current culture's favorite historic nation to pick on is Nazi Germany, an entire country that was just following orders. Now, naive people will say they wouldn't have fallen for it, that they would have been one of the rebels, one of the people who stood up. But we really don't. We really know that's not actually the case. There's only 10 to 20% of the people in any culture that is innovative and is willing to step up and to do the thing that is really scary, and to do things differently, and to hear the naysayers and say, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. And here's the deal. If you've made it this point in the video, you are the exception to the rule. You're the exception to the rule if you're here right now. Most people are slaves to the thought forms and beliefs installed by their ancestry and the culture around them, and they're never going to break out. They fall prey to the belief that they are the victims of circumstance. And what set them up to be exactly where they are right now is not their fault, and that's where they'll stop. They'll be like, look, it's not my fault, and it's going to continue to not be my fault, and I'm going to be a victim. But you have a choice, and you can choose responsibility. And this is the thing we truly possess, and is the moment of now. Like, we truly possess the moment of now, and we can make a new choice, and no other time exists. Tomorrow doesn't exist. Only now exists. So don't concern yourself with those who don't make a new choice. You're the only one in charge of your moment of now, and it's you who gets to make the choice, and they make theirs. So when Jocko Willink popularized the idea that discipline equals freedom, it struck many people were like, oh, damn, that really is true. I like that. But for me, it was irritating. And it's not that he's wrong. It's just not the whole story. And what I'm sharing here is not to challenge the idea, but to reinforce it. So you could be disciplined about the wrong things, and that might limit your freedom. And so we have to break down the word of responsibility. Response and ability. Responsibility equals your ability to respond. It's a choice and it's a gift you give yourself in any and every moment. You can choose your response. You have that ability. And if we want to take it a step further, your capability limits your response, and that is your capacity. So what do you have the capacity to do? And so if we look at the definition of capable, it's sufficiently able, having power or capacity, or is qualified. So capacity or capability grows each time you practice something you have yet to master. If you haven't mastered it, you must practice discipline. You must engage in uncomfortable activities, thoughts, and feelings. Comfort happens when you're well within your current capacity, and pushing those boundaries to expand your capacity is uncomfortable. When I started Barbell Shrugged, I was thoroughly uncomfortable. I was afraid of what people were going to think about me. I was afraid I was going to say something stupid on the internet. I was afraid that I was going to say something that was offensive to people. But I just kept showing up, and I grew my capacity, and I expanded my ability to respond, and I became more responsible. My ability to respond grew. And the byproduct was freedom expanded in all directions. My freedom expanded in all directions. And I now have more choices than I did before. I have authority over my own life. Someone else isn't controlling my life. Someone else isn't dictating what's happening. I have control over it. So I had to break old mental models I had adopted from my parents and society, and I expanded my perspective and can see a much bigger picture. And I know you can too. So practicing being in that uncomfortable space is going to expand your capacity. And these choices that you make day to day is going to expand your responsibility. It adds up. So you may be thinking, well, I'm afraid to take action. And a lot of times people don't even recognize that fear is what's keeping them from taking an action. There was a study done several years ago where they were looking at how people who are successful or not view what's holding them back. And they found that people who are not as successful would talk about stress. And then the people who are really successful would talk about fear, because the people who were talking about fear were actually more in touch with reality. They knew that it was fear that was present that was holding them back. Whereas the people who were just like, oh, I'm stressed, they weren't actually present that fear is actually what's causing the feeling of stress. And so if you can get present with, oh, okay, this is my fear that's here right now, and then I can shift my relationship to my fear. Now you have that's the starting point for building up that capacity. And I wondered why other people didn't take the leaps that I had. But after coaching hundreds of clients and a lot of self-reflection, I've concluded that I've been blessed with my relationship to fear. My dad really taught me well how to deal with that. And it's a skill to be developed. So even if you don't have that yet, it's something that no matter where you're starting, you can start shifting your relationship to fear. Now, if you want to get more into what's going on emotionally for people and what's holding them back, I would go back to my last video that I did, and you can go check that out. So in short, I had a mix of like adrenaline junkie, and I had a greater sense of inner security because I had exposed myself to scary tasks over and over again. And so that really started building up my confidence, basically. And so after years of doing this, I started feeling safer and safer and safer. And then it became very easy to take quote unquote risks. And a lot of things that other people go, ooh, isn't that risky? I actually go, no, this is a very, there's no risk involved in this, or there's very little risk involved in this. I really have thought this out. I'm taking action. And where other people say risk, I see certainty. And so That's really another thing that separates the people who are really successful and the people who are not successful is the people who are successful don't see things, they don't label things as risky. They just see opportunity. So as I've developed myself over the years, I have taken my relationship to fear even further. And so I would take actions in the face of fear. But one of the things that I've done more recently is practicing more faith. So anytime I notice that fear is starting to come up, I decree myself with the phrase, I am a man of faith. And this shifts me into a peaceful place where I can really allow my creativity to flow. So where I used to be like scared, but also taking action anyway, what was good. It was a necessary step. But now when I see fear come up, I go, I'm a man of faith. And that brings me into this really calm place where I can then make a really great choice, and my creativity is even higher because now I'm not experiencing fear anymore and trying to be creative in the face of fear. I'm now being creative in the face of faith, which is much easier. And no matter what your religious background or how you operate spiritually, you can practice faith. It has, it doesn't have to do with God in a way that a lot of people think about it. It can, but you're putting your faith into something that's greater than yourself, because there's a higher self, there's a God self, there's a great self, and you can put your faith in that because you know that whatever it is, whatever reason that we're all here and you're here and I'm here is because there's a greater force than just what we have in our life right now. And if we can practice faith that yes, there is something greater at work all the time and we are taken care of, and you have that inner security, you can then that unlocks the creativity automatically. And then when creativity is unlocked, you can then leverage that creativity to make money and to live the life that you really want to live. So the advice I would give young Mike when he was getting out of the Navy in 2005, there's a few things this is some advice I would give him, is if your work is not a fuck yes, lower your living expenses, and so you can fuck around and find out what is a fuck yes. So if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no. So number 2, give yourself time autonomy. Spend your best hours being creative. That is creating something new. Negotiate with your job, staff, spouse, anybody else that is going to help you make it happen. Negotiate with them to at least get the first hour of your day set aside so you can do something creative and playful in nature. And this might just mean waking up an hour earlier. Number 3, delegate and discard tasks. Not all tasks are created equal. Some require more energy than others. Become aware of those tasks that take the most and get rid of them. This applies to habits as well. You don't need to do some of these tasks. Some of these habits can be just stopped. I know it's easier said than done. But at some point you fell in a habit of feeling like they're important. And the truth is, many of the tasks and habits that you have in place right now can go undone altogether and the world will not fall apart. So write down every task you do, then ask yourself, can I delegate or discard this? And this is something that is a continuous process. This is not something that you're going to do once and go, okay, I figured out what I don't want to do, what I want to do. Years can go by and you think you wanted to do something, and now it's something you actually want to delegate. Another piece of advice: give yourself no more than 15 minutes a day to think about money. You will not make money by dwelling on money itself. Over 15 minutes is a sign of financial insecurity, and it's wasting your creative energy. Hold authority over your thoughts. Be aware of the feelings and practice authority over those as well. And lastly, join a community of people with the same commitment. I went to that marketing conference to find them back in 2013, and you can do it by joining us over at the Coach Flow community. Check the link in the description. You'll be able to find the Coach Flow community. We're there for you. And so you may be asking yourself right now, will it work for me? Now, starting Barbell Shrug paid off spiritually long before it paid off financially. If you make the purpose of creative play to make money, you're choosing the hard route. If you overthink what it is you should do, then you're no longer playing in creativity. And if you've never made money in creative play, it may take months or years for it to become your sole income, and make that okay. So the more time you spend in creative play each day, the faster you'll get there and the less you'll care. You probably heard, the art of not giving a fuck, right? So get into creative play each day and then figure out how you're going to leverage that into making money. It may not happen overnight, but if you start doing it, the sooner you start doing it, the sooner you're going to get there. So if you want a community to support you, come join us at Coach Flow community, and I will see you in the next video.